All right, welcome. This is Chapter 5, Video 5. All right, and we're going to carry on, and we're going to look at the next program in this application here called the Count to 5. And there's actually 1, 2, 3 ways we can count in C#. Actually, there's probably another way, and the program, how it works, let me just bring it over here, is that when I click this button, it simply just goes down and counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't just display 1 to 5. It actually it repeats. Display a 1, displays a 2, displays a 3, displays a 4, and that's why they refer to it as a loop, because it runs the code and it checks. It sees if it needs to run again, and then it loops again, it checks, and then it loops again, and then it checks, and it loops again, and then it checks. So there's quite a few little moving parts to this. In addition to that, there's also what they refer to as a counter that allows you to increment the counter at a particular value. Let's say 1, in this case it's counting by 1. So it loops, counts, increments, loops, counts, increments, loops, counts, increments, and so forth. And we're going to use this for loop. So now how this works is, and I've given you the code for this one. So the name of that control is called the for button, and when we click it, we want it to do this. So there's only really a few lines of code to make this happen. The first line of code, of course, we're going to need to have some kind of a declaration statement, so we could declare. So this line is definitely your declare statement. But the for statement and the syntax in the for statement is going to be an assignment statement, it's going to be a condition statement, and it's going to be a counter in there as well. So the for syntax means let's loop for a fixed amount of repetitions here. And it's made up of 3 parts. You've got the initializing the counter, you've got the condition to see if it still needs to count, and then of course the counter itself, which increments up or down. All right. So, starting off with this one right here, we're going to have a counter, and we're going to start the counter off at 1. So we're initializing the counter to start at 1. And then, in this one here, we have to ask the condition. Do we want a loop or not? So, is 1 less than or equal to 5? Well, that's true. As long as it's true, let's keep going. And if it's true, let's take count and increment it by 1. Now, it doesn't do that until after it's executed the line right here. So once it's true, it drops down to here. It says, oh, let's take 1 and add it as an item to the list box. And that's the list box here. And we're going to be using a lot of list box in this chapter. So we're outputting now into not just a single label control, but now into a list box right here. So kind of work backwards here. And so what happens now is it displays 1, and it jumps back. And then the counter goes from count 1 to count 2. So at that stage, it's going to ask the question, is 2 less than or equal to 5, which it is. And it's going to say, let's put 5 and add it in the list box. So the 2 is definitely the next one. And it's going to loop back, and it's going to increment by 1, and it's going to become 3. So is 3 less than or equal to 5? That's true. So let's take 3, and let's add it to the item, and so on. So it's going to loop, loop, loop. And that's why they call it the for loop, because it goes through that cycle. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint on here so we can actually see this in place. All right, I put a breakpoint right here at the for loop, and then when I run my program and I click on the for loop, of course it stops the breakpoint at that point, and it initializes the counter. Is 1 less than? It's true, so it drops down here and says, let's take 1 and put it in as an item. So it's going to put a 1 in that list box. And then it goes in here and says, let's take 1 and add 1. So the plus plus means let's just increment the counter by 1. And then it's going to test the count again. Is 2, you can see there, is 2 less than, I'll just put a little below over here. 2 is definitely less than 5, and it's going to display 2. It's going to go back, is 2 add plus plus, so that should change to a 3. It does. Is 3 less than 5? It is. Display 3. Take 3, let's add 4, or add 1 to the counter, and keep going. And it's just looping through that syntax. So you have to look at the syntax when you're trying to count or count a fixed number of times. This is a great syntax. So when you're using constant number of repetition structures, the for loop is one of the better ways to do that. All right, so we'll have a look at the next repetition structure in the next video.